The train hissed like it was disappointed in her as it slowed, iron wheels screaming against the rails, and Clara Whitmore tightened, her grip on the single battered suitcase that held the sum of her old life, her gloves folded neatly, on top as if order could still be summoned when everything else had fallen apart. And when she stepped down onto the dusty platform of Red Willow Creek, she felt the weight of the sky, itself pressing on her shoulders, wide and merciless, and nothing like the narrow gray heavens she had left behind. And she saw him immediately, because men like Caleb. Roe did not blend into the background, but stood like part of the land itself, tall and weather-carved, hat pulled low, eyes steady in a way that suggested storms had passed through him and failed to take him down. And beside him stood a boy of about 8 with hair the color of summer wheat and a solemn expression that didn't belong on someone so young, and Clara's heart gave a painful lurch because the letter had mentioned a son. But letters never prepared you for the reality of a child's gaze, the way it could weigh you and measure you in a single breath. And as she approached, dust clinging to her hem, she rehearsed the words she had practiced 100 times. "Thank you for meeting me, I'm grateful. I'll do my best," but none of them seemed right when Caleb tipped his hat politely and said her name like it was already familiar to him. And the boy stepped forward before she could speak and announced, with quiet certainty, "You're prettier than your picture," which startled a laugh out of her despite the knot in her chest. And in that laugh, something loosened just enough for her to breathe again. And they rode in near silence to the ranch, the wagon creaking, the land stretching endlessly, and Clara felt every mile carrying her further from the woman she had been when desperation drove her to answer an advertisement that promised security in exchange for marriage. And when they reached the house, solid, worn, honest, she finally found the courage to say what had been burning in her since the moment she stepped off the train, that she understood if he changed his mind, that she could be sent back, that she did not want to be a burden. And Caleb stopped, turned to her, eyes steady and unyielding in a way that was not cruel, but impossibly kind, and said the words that would echo through her bones for the rest of her life. "You can send yourself back if you choose, Clara, but I won't, because my son already chose you." And the boy nodded as if this were the most obvious truth in the world. And in that moment, Clara realized this arrangement was never going to be simple or safe, but it might be something far more dangerous, real. And as night fell over Red Willow Creek and she lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, she understood that this story was no longer about survival alone, but about whether broken people could build something whole together. And if this beginning has already caught your heart, stay with us and remember to subscribe to the channel, because this journey has only just begun. Morning came early on the ranch, sunlight spilling through the thin curtains like it had somewhere important to be. And Clara woke with a start, disoriented, her body braced for the narrow bed and cramped room of her old boarding house before she remembered where she was. And the realization settled over her in layers. New home, new role, new expectations, and fear followed close behind. But there was no time to indulge it, because life on the ranch did not pause for uncertainty. And by breakfast, she found herself seated at a rough wooden table across from Caleb and his son, whose name she learned was Thomas. And the simple act of passing bread felt momentous, as if each small kindness was a test she might fail. And days unfolded in a rhythm she had never known, marked by chores and meals and the steady presence of a man who did not press her for affection or obedience, but treated her with a careful respect that was somehow more intimidating than authority. And Clara began to understand that Caleb was not buying a wife so much as offering a place, and that frightened her because places could be lost. And as weeks passed, she and Thomas grew close in the quiet spaces between responsibilities, reading together in the evenings, laughing over small mishaps. And when he reached for her hand without thinking, it sent a shock through her chest that was equal parts joy and terror. Because children did not offer their trust lightly, and the past she carried like a shadow threatened to taint everything good. And when whispers began in town, glances sharp with judgment, Clara felt the old instinct rise again, the urge to leave before she was asked to go, And one evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, she finally voiced it, telling Caleb she would understand if he sent her away, that the arrangement had been unfair to him, to Thomas, that she could disappear as quietly as she had arrived. And he listened without interruption, then answered with a steadiness that cut through her spiraling thoughts, telling her that family was not built on perfection, but on choice, that Thomas had chosen her every day since she stepped off that train, and that he himself was choosing her now, not out of obligation, but out of hope. And something inside Clara broke open, grief and gratitude spilling together, and when she realized she was crying, he did not look away, and that simple act anchored her more than any promise could. And the turning point came not in grand declarations, but in a moment of danger when a storm tore across the plains and Thomas was briefly lost among the chaos, and Clara ran without thinking, fear sharpening her into something fierce and unyielding. And when she found him safe and pulled him into her arms, she understood that she had already crossed the line she was so afraid of, that her heart had chosen too. And afterward, as the storm passed and the world smelled clean and new, Caleb looked at her with something like awe and said quietly that this was what belonging looked like. And in the days that followed, Clara stopped packing her suitcase each night in her mind, stopped measuring herself against the possibility of rejection, and began instead to imagine a future that stretched as wide as the land around them, imperfect and demanding and achingly beautiful. And if this chapter stirred something in you, if you believe in second chances and chosen families, subscribe to the channel and walk with us through the rest of this unforgettable story, because love like this deserves to be told and shared. Spring arrived at Red Willow Creek with a quiet insistence, green pushing through the hard earth as if the land itself were daring to hope again. And Clara felt something similar, stirring inside her as she learned the unspoken language of the ranch, the way mornings began before the sun and ended with tired satisfaction. And though her hands blistered and her back ached, she welcomed the pain because it anchored her to the present, to a life that asked something of her and in return gave her a place to stand. And yet peace never arrived without shadows, because the past had a way of traveling faster than trains. And when a man from her former city life appeared in town with questions, too sharp to be innocent, Clara realized that reinvention was never as simple as distance, and fear crept back into her thoughts, whispering that Caleb and Thomas would be better off without her complications, and she began pulling away in small, careful ways, convinced she was protecting them, until Thomas noticed, his young eyes too perceptive, and asked her outright if she was leaving. And the hurt in his voice cracked something open in her resolve, forcing her to confront the truth that love could not be rationed to avoid pain. And when Caleb finally confronted her under the wide evening sky, she confessed everything, the mistakes, the shame, the running, and waited for judgment. But instead he offered understanding, telling her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to stay despite it. And in that moment, Clara chose not just the ranch, but herself. And if this chapter resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because the story of choosing hope over fear continues. Summer burned bright and relentless, the kind of heat that stripped life down to essentials, and with it came trials that tested the fragile balance they had built. Drought threatening the land, tempers flaring under the strain, and Clara found herself stepping into roles she never imagined, negotiating with suppliers, soothing Thomas's anxieties, standing beside Caleb as an equal rather than a guest. And the shift was subtle but profound, because partnership was not declared, it was practiced. And when the ranch faced its greatest challenge yet, a decision that could cost them everything, or secure their future, Clara's voice mattered, her insight valued, and the respect in Caleb's eyes changed something fundamental between them, deepening into love that was no longer cautious but brave. And when gossip turned to acceptance, and the town began to see her not as an outsider, but as part of the Rowe family, Clara understood that belonging was not granted all at once but earned through perseverance. And as summer storms broke the drought at last, she realized that she was no longer waiting to be sent away. And if you're invested in this journey, subscribe to the channel to keep walking with this family through every hard-won victory. Autumn arrived like a promise kept, the land heavy with harvest, the house warmer with laughter, And Clara stood at the edge of the field, watching Caleb and Thomas work side by side, a vision that once felt impossible and now felt inevitable. And when Caleb finally spoke the words they had both been living toward, asking her not out of necessity but out of love, Clara answered without fear, because the woman who once begged to be sent back no longer existed, replaced by someone forged by choice, resilience, and devotion. And as they gathered with neighbors and friends to celebrate a union built not on convenience but on commitment, Clara understood that her story was no longer defined by where she came from, but by who she chose to become. And as the seasons turned and life continued with all its uncertainty and beauty, the truth remained simple and powerful. Family is chosen. Love is built, and home is not a place you arrive at, but one you decide to stay in. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of the strength found in second chances, subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because stories like this are meant to be shared.